Welcome to another episode of Well, Don't Tell the Kids. I'm Janet Lee, your host, and today I'm speaking with my guest, Ana Cordova. I wanted to thank you very much for joining me today, Ana.
Thank you for having me.
Ana has a very interesting walk forward, so I wanted to start the bachelor's level, what you studied, where you were at.
Sure. So I actually started at the Illinois Institute of Technology, which is in Chicago on the south side, which is quite a bit different from Wyoming, which is where I'm from originally. But I was kind of set on this whole idea of chemical engineer / patent attorney. But I started at the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago and had a scholarship at that point from the Bill Gates Millennium Foundation, which was a full ride with cost of attendance, basically. So a true full ride scholarship. And the school said, oh, great, it will pay for your tuition. And I was left sitting there trying to figure out how to pay my rent. So after a lot of struggle with IIT, I decided to transfer out my freshman year, go somewhere where they kind of recognize the gravity of my scholarship, and also somewhere that I could explore a little bit more, because even after one semester of chemical engineering, I wasn't completely convinced it was the right path for me. And I ended up at New Mexico State. Spent 4.5 years there. It was fabulous. It's a great little college town on the south end of New Mexico. And there I transferred majors a couple times before settling on biochemistry, and really fell in love with the scientific method, with doing laboratory research. Unfortunately, it was like many first loves, one of those things that fizzles and dies. But I hadn't figured that out yet. I went to the Fred Hutch for a year, which is a cancer research center in Seattle.
Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, commonly, or not commonly, lovingly known as the Hutch.
Exactly. And there I spent a year doing some public health research and some clinical research on breast cancer. And then I ended up going to Hopkins, which was an interesting turning point, because when I went to undergrad, I got kind of jaded on the, I'm going this one place because it seems perfect idea. And so in grad school, I obviously had matured and thought, okay, if I'm going to apply anywhere but the University of Washington, which was affiliated with the Fred Hutch, I was going to go to the best school in the nation for my discipline, which at the time was still biochemistry. And the best school in the nation for that was Johns Hopkins. So I went from putting all of my eggs into one basket into two baskets, showing much maturity and growth, and ended up getting into Hopkins and not getting into UW. So I moved across the country. It was pretty crazy. It was not at all what I expected, but I went to Johns Hopkins. I settled into their program for human genetics and molecular biology.
This is now their main campus in Baltimore?
This is their medical campus, actually. But yes, in Baltimore. Spent another 4 years there doing lots of research in different labs. And then, like a terrible breakup, decided to leave before the wedding, so I didn't quite get my PhD, but we were pretty well engaged. I got a master's. So that's kind of like the bulk of my education, and then I went into the workforce, and then I went back to school to go to Northwestern to get a Master of Science in Law degree.
Master of Science in Law. I see that also you have the AAAS work. Was that before this?
It was all of the above.
Okay.
So I started at the AAAS in 2014.
Which is for the American Association for the Advancement of Science.
Yes. I started there. That was basically my first grown-up job. I will always remember it fondly. It was actually a great job. I had a great boss and great coworkers, and we were working on science education and developing curricula for middle and high school science students that would be aligned with the next generation science standards, which have been adopted by a dozen or 24 states. So in the middle of that, in the middle of working at the AAAS, I went and got my nails done in order to impress my then fiance, now husband's sister, who was coming to town. And I went to a nail salon that I've never been back to. I had never been there before. And sitting next to me was a law professor from Northwestern. And so we got to talking, and
as you do when you're getting your nails done.
Exactly. It's such a social thing. I love that about nail salons. So we just started talking, and she was in town for a law professor convention, as you do. And I said that I had always wanted to go to law school, gave her a little bit of information about my background. And she said, oh, well, do you want to litigate? And I looked kind of like a deer in the headlights because I'm still on the periphery of what being a lawyer actually means. And she said, do you want to argue in a courtroom? And I said, no, not really. You know, I think I'd be good with like the paperwork of the law side. And she said, oh, well, we have this brand new program. At that point, it was 1 year old. They had just finished graduating their first graduating class because this was in May. And it's a program for people with STEM backgrounds to go into law in the areas of business law and entrepreneurship, IP law, and regulatory affairs. So I deferred for a year so I could finish up the grant that we were working on at the AAAS, and also because I didn't want to completely have this upheaval of my life in 2 months. So I deferred for a year, was part of the third graduating class, and I loved it. Northwestern was great. There's a thing at Northwestern at the law school called the Northwestern difference, which is this concept that, like, you know, we're supportive, we're not competitive, we build each other up, we don't tear each other down, we build community, we care about each other as people, kind of outlook on each other as our classmates in our cohort. But I really think it's a great thing, and I really felt like they put their money where their mouth was, because it really was a great situation, a great community. Northwestern really was a great school for law school.
Still is. So they're always evolving, it sounds like. So you've been out with that degree for a bit, and then I just wondered where you took it or where you're taking it now.
Right. So I started with this organization that's a nonprofit called the Access Lex Institute, and they used to be a student loan lender back in like the 80s, and they loaned student loans to students, mostly graduate students, mostly law students, but they did so in a way that was student-centered. They charged the lowest interest rates they possibly could to try and drive the market down for all student loans to be at a lower level. So they've always had this kind of student-focused, nonprofit kind of mindset. And then in 2010, I want to say, the federal government took out all of the kind of middlemen of student loan lenders. And so suddenly my organization had a whole bunch of money, a whole bunch of people that were still paying back loans, and no real purpose. And so they completely rebranded and became this completely nonprofit entity, at least as far as the branch I'm on is concerned. And we do research and drive policy to improve the lives and education of students in law school. So whether that means increasing diversity to reflect the diversity of society, whether it's maintaining things like public service loan forgiveness, which the federal government has been a little bit wishy-washy on and trying to get rid of, or at least the Republicans were trying to with the Prosper Act, which was the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act that didn't go through, but was at least presented. So we work on a lot of different initiatives like that. I specifically work on trying to get law schools that have lower bar passage rates up to at least 70% passage rate for all of their first-time bar takers.
Some work you've done in enhancing the bar exam experience. So do you find that to be an internal challenge or external?
As far as what students face?
The parts that need to be enhanced?
It's definitely multidimensional. So it's everything from students just not having a mastery of the material, or even going as far back as things like not understanding grammar and syntax and punctuation, to be able to effectively write essays that portray what they're thinking and the analytical reasoning they might be doing, but they're not having an easy time portraying that to the graders of the bar exam if they're making typos or things like that. So there's like this whole academic edge that runs a full gamut. And then there's also things like study skills. So students go through 3 years of law school, basically, right? But then they go through this intensive 8 to 10 week study period between graduation and the bar exam that is unlike any studying they really do in law school. In some ways it's a review of the material, but in other ways it's this very specialized skill. It's almost like studying for the LSAT or studying for the GRE, in that you're presented questions in a certain way and you're expected to answer them in a certain way. One of the academic support people that I worked with likened it to being a sheep. That in this instance, it's great to be a sheep. That students should strive to be a sheep, because sheep are what the graders recognize. And if you look like a sheep and write like a sheep and reason like a sheep, you're going to get passed, and you'll become a lawyer. So for some students, it's just that kind of, I won't say 180 because it's not that much of a deviation, but it's a pretty hard switch from the studying they did in law school to this 8 to 10 week study period they do between graduation and the bar. And then there's just some of the stressors that can get into a student's head. They can't actually take out student loans for that period. They can't take out any new student loans because they're not technically in school anymore. It's this kind of weird quasi, not quite a professional, but have technically graduated period. And so they might have to suddenly, I say suddenly, they should have known about it for 3 years, but some students just don't really know it until it's there, that they have to, feed themselves, house themselves. If they have any kind of financial dependence, these stressors can just build and build and build. And there's some resources at most law schools, but just being able to take care of their entire graduating class's housing for 2 months, is a pretty insurmountable feat for any given law school. There are some interesting places, some innovative solutions that some institutions are coming up with. For example, housing their bar takers in the dorms, the undergraduate dorms of their sister university. But for some standalone law schools, that might not be a reality or a possibility. So it's a very, very complex, very multifaceted problem.
I assume that you're tying in some of your training, your scientific training from earlier in your career to your present situation.
Exactly. And that's really what attracted me to the position, was being able to do these things that are a little more social science-y in a lot of ways. How do you fix these social and well-being kind of problems in addition to the academic, but doing it in a data-driven, empirical way.
Well, that's great. That's fantastic to hear. I never really thought about what happens right after graduation from professional school. There's an event coming up with Northwestern alumni, and it's on discerning career paths, and I think that you're speaking there. I just wanted to give a little shout out for that, and then ask you what you want to get across.
So that is next week's, and I will be speaking in a panel along with a few other people who have also gone to Northwestern, and I believe one person who actually didn't go to Northwestern, but is kind of Northwestern adjacent. And what I'm hoping to get across is just that there is no straight path in life. At least there hasn't been one for me. That your life can change if you go to the right nail salon on the right day. with the right convention in town. Exactly. And just the idea of being open to new things. I think being open really helped me in my career just because after graduating from Hopkins, I was open to a lot of different areas in terms of getting a job. So whether that was science writing or education or policy, I was open to a lot of different things, and it worked out for me. And I really hope that being open in the future will continue to be good for me, and so hopefully it'll be good for other people as well.
It seems like you backed a lot of the stance or position of openness with actual action, though. It seems like there was another component of preparation in there.
Oh, that's definitely true. I mean, you can't, as a high school graduate, just say, oh, I'm open to the world, maybe I'll become a doctor or something like that. I definitely picked a field that lends itself to a lot of different fields in a lot of different ways that I wasn't really aware of when I first started. But like statistics are invaluable. And if you know statistics, then in a lot of instances, you'll become one of the smarter people in the room because someone will throw out a statistic and you can say, oh, that's bunk, or, oh, that might actually have some actionable,
utility.
Exactly.
I think that's the power of the college education and also the corollary, the liberal arts education. Good luck on that panel. I hope that it is helpful to the audience. I think it's a younger set. I wanted to thank you also for just stopping in and letting us know your highlights about where you've been. As a parting shot, is there anything you'd like to impart here?
I think don't let anyone who doesn't know you on a really deep personal level, like a really strong mentor or a really big champion of yours, tell you that you can't do something. And I see that, I say that with that caveat because I think it's important to stay rational. And so from your mentors, if they say, oh, maybe being, an astronaut is not for you because you've never really gotten past algebra, is a reasonable thing to say. But I think too many times in too many instances, and even in my own background, I let people who didn't really know who I was and what I am capable of and what my ambitions were tell me that I couldn't do something, and I internalized that, and it didn't turn out as well as it could have. So not taking unwanted, unasked for advice from people who don't know you. That's a lot of negatives, and I apologize for that. But only taking advice from those who really know you and really have your own interests at heart, I guess, is the nice way of putting it, and not letting the haters get you down.
Well, thank you for that and for your conversation and insights, Anna. I wanted to thank all of you for listening, and you can keep us posted.
Okay.
And thank you all for listening. Today, once again, I've been speaking with Ana Cordova. I'm Janet Lee. Please stay tuned for more episodes of Well, Don't Tell the Kids.